Fantastic. Thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you very much for having me here today. I'm really excited. Ian, your talk was amazing. Can't see where Ian is, but it was really inspiring and really insightful to see what's going on in the gaming industry. So, as Alistair has kindly said, my name is Ruby Steele, and I'm a senior design strategist and experienced designer from Smart Design. We are a design consultancy. We're based in Shoreditch. This is a picture of our studio. Not that exciting, but we work for a variety of industries across digital and physical products. We do have a focus in healthcare. The team in London particularly love to work in healthcare and on projects that are going to significantly impact people's lives. The main office is actually in New York, and I'm part of the London office. So worldwide, we've got about 100 people. So I have got this sort of provocative statement that I'm really interested to sort of see what you guys think. It's the first time I've been to one of these meetups, and I'm already absolutely loving being in a room of such interesting people. But my hypothesis is that inclusive design results in better experiences for everyone. So what I mean by that is by designing inclusively and universally for kind of all abilities, you create better experiences for everyone. I'm kind of going to take you through a couple of case studies, one from Smart Design and one from Big Life Fix, to see what you think about that. So inclusive design is really in Smart's DNA. One of the products that Smart is best known for is the OXO Good Grip kitchenware products. I don't know who's familiar with those products. Okay, yeah, good amount of people. So the story of those products was that our CEO and founder was having dinner with a friend, and the wife of the friend was trying to peel apples for an apple pie, and she was really struggling to do so because the potato peeler that she was using was not working with the arthritis that she had in her hands. And our CEO, David Stow, was looking at this thinking, this is ridiculous. How is it that such a basic household object is so inaccessible to someone with something as common as arthritis? So he kind of set out on this mission to design a better version of this potato peeler, and he did it in quite an interesting way. And that was, not only did he look at the criteria and the needs of the lady or people with arthritis and the dexterity issues that they might have, but he also looked at the other end of the spectrum, so to speak. So people that were kind of needing really high performance kitchen tools, and so people like pro chefs. And what ended up happening is that this was born, which is essentially a potato peeler that is incredibly comfortable to hold. It's got really good grip, but it's also got an incredibly effective blade. And by designing something that sort of suited both of those criteria, everything in the middle was covered as well. So actually, the OXO Good Grip range is incredibly popular and very mainstream, because everybody is covered when you go for those two extremes, and this is what we call universal design. So I think that's really, really interesting and really inspiring. So the second case study to sort of support my hypothesis here is the work that I did on Big Life Fix. So I already know that some of you have seen the program, but for those that haven't, the concept was to take a team of designers, of which I was one, and we were given the challenge of various kind of problems across the UK faced by people in everyday situations. Often they were suffering with some kind of physical disability, and they wanted to be able to do things that the rest of us would take for granted, but were not able to do so. So each of the designers on the show was taken to was sort of assigned a story, and that kind of, you had that kind of like one-on-one relationship where you were designing for a real person and testing with them and developing it. So the story that I'm going to talk through today is that of Josh. This is Jude, so he's one of the other designers on the show that I did this project with. It was actually done for the Children in Need special that aired in November last year. So the person that we were designing for was little Josh. Josh is 8 years old and he has got Norrie disease. So Norrie disease is something that meant that Josh was born profoundly blind. He's got no light perception whatsoever, so he's never had anything since the day he was born. He does go to a mainstream school, however, so there are some other visually impaired children in the school, but Josh is the only profoundly blind one, and they are in the minority, and he is certainly in the minority. So the problem that we were faced with was the fact that Josh was really being very, very excluded at playtime. So he has a wonderful teaching assistant in the classroom who'll be helping him get through the classes with various tools to keep him up to date. But in the playground, you know, as you can probably imagine, it's an absolute nightmare for someone that can't see. You know, not only have you got uneven grounds, but you've got trying to find your way around, you've got moving obstacles, you've got noise, and what ended up happening is Josh was often just left on his own in the corner. Often he didn't even go outside at all, and he would actually just play on his Spotify game that he absolutely loves. But it was a real concern for his parents because he was missing out. Jude and I did, we wanted to learn more about this, and we spoke to some adults also with Norrie disease about how important they felt it was for Josh to be included in playtime, as it were. And it was just emphasised that it really is such an incredibly critical time for children to, in the developmental process that Josh was missing out on, because it's a place of freedom, it's a place of expression, it's where you make your friends, it's where you make your mistakes and fall down and pick yourself back up again. And Josh was just being left behind in all of that. When we were talking to the adults with Norrie, there was one particular quote that really stood out to me, which was that people don't talk to me, I have to talk to them. And it sort of really struck us as to how excluded people can feel when, you're different to other people, because actually, all the kind of normal social cues that you'd get from eye contact or, having people that are the same as you, when that's taken away, it can be a real barrier and actually will mean that you're excluded. So this was our challenge. It was, how can Josh play in the playground with the other children? And that's what Jude and I went off to try and figure out, and had many brainstorming sessions as to what we could design. What could we design to help Josh be confident, to be like the other children, to know where he was, to get involved in all the games. And we were trying to come up with ideas that might enable him to do so. Now, one of the things that we tested, that we decided felt like a good kind of, way to go was, this is a diagram of the playground, and we basically put Bluetooth beacons across the whole space. And then we had an app, so Akram, one of the other designers on the show, he coded us an app that meant that as you're walking along, the phone will register when you pass over a Bluetooth beacon, and it might say, you are at the swings, or you are here, or you are that. And so it was kind of like signposting, digitally signposting, kind of like where you are. So we took that off to the playground, and we started to experiment with that. It was sort of technically a bit difficult, but we were sort of trying to get an idea of the experience he was trying to create. Now, this is where we sort of suddenly realized that we were designing it all wrong. And we realized that we kind of made a massive mistake, because actually we realized that focusing on Josh alone is not designing inclusively. So if you think back to the OXO example, where you had the woman with arthritis and then you've got people at the other end, we were just focusing just on Josh. And actually we realised that our design was suffering because of it, because it was changing Josh to suit his environment rather than changing the environment to suit Josh, which is what we should have been doing. And I think that's actually a trap that a lot of designers fall into. And I'd just like to, putting this slide up, this is a product by Microsoft, which is a pair of goggles that reads the environment, so it scans things and it will tell you, it kind of like, it acts as your eyes. There is a place for these products, I'm not saying there isn't, but it's not the same as being really truly inclusive. And that's kind of what we realised, and realised that we needed to make a change. So we kind of needed to go back to the drawing board a little bit and study the play environment itself and the other children. So we went in and sort of just watched the other children, the other children play. And what we realised is that the things that the children need are actually sort of minimal, but sort of bare bones of something to kind of create games around. We'd started to come up with different ways that we could create games, but actually, when watching the kids in the playground, one of the things that they loved more than anything was a tree stump. And the tree stump was just, to them, like, you know, a castle, and then the ground was lava, and then they had to jump from here to that. And they absolutely loved it. They were all kind of swarming, and actually, the thing that we realised about this particular group of children and this particular kind of playground at this point in their development, freedom and expression and imagination was what was really important. This was just a little aside. When we were doing that study, we asked two of the children to be kind of like you know, the sort of the detectives of the group, and to write down all the things that they could see. We were kind of using them as like little user researchers, which was really cute. But when you actually like look what they were talking about, it was all about imagination. It was saying this person's this, and this means this, and it was changing all the time. So we realised that we couldn't be too restrictive. So our aim then became to sort of look at the criteria of both Josh and the other children. So for Josh, it was you know, it's about navigation, but for the other children, it's about having this unrestrictive like framework for play, as demonstrated by this slide. And we were hoping that this would design something that both Josh and his peers would be able to enjoy. So this is the design of the playground. Essentially, what we created was a kind of railroad of kind of like sort of little streets that Josh would be able to find his way around using guidance paving, which is the paving that potentially lots of people know about, but also lots of people don't know about, which is that this surface is used on the street to guide visually impaired people around. The ones with the kind of, there's ones with sort of like lozenge, long kind of oblong shaped strips, which you can feel underfoot as you're walking along, and that will guide you in a direction. That will say you need to go this way. And then there's ones with kind of blisters and sort of blobs that you can feel underfoot, and that basically means kind of hazard or stop. So by using that kind of language, we covered the entire playground, so that if you couldn't see, you would actually be able to get to any point in the playground just by using the kind of like what you could feel under your feet. Now, to sort of build on this, to try and give it more both sort of navigation for a non-sighted child, wherever there was a blister tile, we made it a sound tile. So we made the blister tiles a kind of another audio signpost to help navigate you around. So each of these roads, if you will, was a different sound. This was the animal noise crossroad, and this was the musical one. So this one here was the tiger sound. This one here was the whale sound. So Josh, when he comes into the playground, he knows that he always starts on Birdsong Avenue. He goes up to the top, and he can go around the crossroads to be able to say, okay, if I'm going to go to the AstroTurf in the corner, I need to go Birdsong. The actual middle one was like a boing sound, and then it was like Guitar Road, and that would get him where he wanted to go. But equally, these sounds are obviously something that kind of draw children in, and they can use to create their own games themselves. We did add a few little interactive elements, like if you jump on all the 8 kind of tiles all at the same time. It would have a kind of celebration, or a kind of like an Easter egg, if you will, sound, so that when the children were working together, they found an extra sound. But what it meant was that Josh would be able to find his way around. So this is actually us testing it with the Winchester goalball team. Goalball is an amazing sport, entirely designed for visually impaired people. They did make me do it, where they put like a proper blackout set of goggles on. And it's amazing. It's very cleverly designed, because it's the ball itself has a bell in it, and everything is done through sound. But it's a really, really fun game to play. It was actually designed for World War II soldiers that had lost their sight. But like anyone can play, you just have to wear the goggles to play if you are sighted. So once we'd sort of come up with this concept and we tested it and we managed to get the sound tiles to work, because that was a challenge in itself, we then had to set about to actually build this playground. There's a whole other story about how difficult that actually was. We had to get support from a really amazing company, Mace Construction, to help build this playground. It was quite extraordinary what you're able to do with the power of children in need behind you, because we did it in about 3 weeks or something. Jude and I are incredibly grateful for all the people that helped, because a lot of people put a lot of work into this. So I would just like to say that. And I'm just going to play a short video now to show the kind of impact that the playground had. I will read the captions for those that can't see them.
I've got a graze all the way out my leg, which was the first day in year 3. So since, I've never played with my friends out here since.
So 8-year-old Josh was born completely blind. You see him walking down the corridor.
Hip hop, rap, Pokemon Go, morning, shopping and Jack 2. So far, so good.
This is him in his playground. Josh has lots of friends but doesn't play with them outside.
My favourite class is playtime. My class always goes outside with the playground TV. It's too big. And I can't find my friends.
So designer Ruby visits Josh at home to work out what could help.
What's this race thing?
God knows.
He's on a swing.
So I've been thinking a lot about this guidance paving. Wouldn't it be cool if it did more than just indicate underfoot? What if it had a sound attached to it with more information?
Ruby and engineer Jude spend weeks coming up with ideas. You'll see us in our brainstorming sessions. It's time to call in the builders. There we go, that's Mace Construction. And we're laying tiles with many, many miles of cables.
Basically, go in this direction. It's braille for the soles of the feet.
Please excuse the plingy-plangy music, that was not my choice. So this is Josh coming to the playground for the first time.
Is a sound, and at the end of every road is the same sound. Have you ever strayed off one of the lines? You just find one again, and you follow it until you get to a sound tile, and you jump up and down, and then you know exactly where you are, because they're always in the same place. This is what it was all about, yeah.
So they're about to release all the children into the playground. Here they come. They all come running in.
When he's in this space, he's just like any other kid. He's playing like his friends. He's playing with his friends.
So there you go. So that was the day that the playground was revealed to Josh in sort of true TV fashion. We weren't supposed to tell Josh what was going on until the last moment, which is obviously completely not how you usually design something, but we did involve other visually impaired kids to test it. They need to have a little bit of theatre. Anyway, I'm pleased to say that the playground's been really successful since then. Josh is now going into the playground at least 4 times a week, and the children have been really loving it. So coming back to my hypothesis that I put to you at the beginning, inclusive design results in a better experience for everyone. I'm just kind of interested to see what your feedback is on this, because this is what I've been sort of contemplating as putting this talk together. But I do kind of feel like the way that we, by looking at the criteria of those two different kinds of children in the playground, we were able to create an experience that was better for all of them and not just about Josh. And actually it can be, you know, I like to think that it can be an inspiration to other kind of spaces where actually, you know, accessibility doesn't necessarily, and inclusivity doesn't need to be a kind of add-on, but a bit like Ian was saying, if you design it in right from the beginning, you kind of go to new places. And I think that's for a few reasons. The first is that inclusive design means finding the fundamental human truth. Like, we had to understand what really, really mattered to those children about being in the playground, rather than the sort of trying to come up with concocting sort of new games. It was about understanding that imagination and freedom was really important. And if you go that deep and you manage to understand something that fundamental, it applies to all humans, because we are kind of wired the same way. The second thing is that inclusive design means finding the common ground. So I think by creating an experience that so intrinsically links everybody together, so through play and through tactile and sound, for those that were in that space, you're uniting people in a way that is more powerful than because it doesn't separate. The other thing I feel is that, certainly in this case, that inclusive design means pushing your creativity further. I feel that it was the nature of the problem that we were set that meant that we tried different things, they didn't work, and we had to keep going until it fit, until it met all that criteria. And when you do continue to push an idea, it does improve, and having that drive, I think, really made a big difference. Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
Thank you so much, Ruby, for all the case studies and your enthusiasm. My question is about, it relates to an ideal vision of an inclusive world. You mentioned the universal design, so we see that's the final goal. When we have all the inclusivity in the world, it's implemented, and then we have the universal, perfectly designed world. But what do you think are the biggest challenges on the way to implement that vision of universal design in any field of life?
I think actually one of the biggest problems is, working at design consultancy, accessibility isn't actually something that is on the table very much. In the briefs that come in, we're still designing for mainstream, and, products like the OXO are they are probably more of an exception to the rule. Like, most of the time, big companies are looking, they're trying to make money, they're trying to go for the masses, they're trying to go for the mainstream. And I think it's just about education and, events like this and people talking about it like this. And because it really, people get very scared to do things differently when they think that, they're not going to make money from it. But actually, we need to educate people and explain that there is so much money being lost by excluding people. So I think that, I think the challenges are in the subject matter not being vocalized enough, and the non-accessible winning almost.
If you can say your name, and if you're happy to say what company you work for as well, that would be ace.
Yeah, no problem. My name is Grant. I'm from a company called Dig Inclusion, and we help organizations make sure that their digital stuff is accessible to people with disabilities. And I just want to thank you for your talk today, and also support what you say about inclusive design making a better experience for everyone. I spent the day today with some UX designers, and I was a little bit apprehensive about maybe some of the preconceptions that they may have about inclusion, but at the end of the day, without exception, all of those designers agreed with your hypothesis that inclusive design makes a better experience for everyone. So I just wanted to say that.
How incredibly encouraging. Great.
Any other questions? In the middle of the back.
Hi, thank you. Really inspiring talk, by the way. I'm Alison. I work for Hotels.com for Expedia. As some of you may or may not know, Hotels.com is pretty dreadful with our accessibility. Expedia is reasonably good. So we're trying to retrofit a lot of stuff at the moment, but the way that we do things, we generally introduce new designs for existing componentry and update that piece of componentry. So I guess my question is from a designer's perspective. Do you have any recommendations on how to retrofit an existing product where there is a lot of work to go back into that existing stuff, not just trying to incorporate accessibility into the areas that you're moving forwards in, because we're making huge leaps with where we're going in future, but there's so much to do that won't get touched again anytime soon.
I mean, I think it's kind of like a lot of other design challenges, in the sense that it's always hard to know like how to prioritize and how to, you know, where to start when you have so many kind of opportunities. So I guess that in your case, when you're trying to retrofit something, which is fantastic, you know, if you go back to, you know, always starting with the real user needs, really sort of, you know, testing and iterating to I guess kind of pinpoint which things are going to have the biggest impact, and go for the things that are going to have the biggest impact. You can't do everything at once. So, you know, sort of ensuring that where you do start is going to make a difference. Like every time you do it, it's getting better and better and better. So, you know, just keep doing the great work and go back to those core user needs.
I've already got a microphone. Hi, I'm Ben. I was a maths teacher for 13 years, and I now do training with teachers, specifically around Google for education tools. But from an education point of view, I know you mentioned you do some work with the health sector, and schools are a perfect example, in my opinion, of bad design. It's very much designed to the middle and never to those extremes in a lot of cases. But I was wondering if you'd had any experience working with education, and how I think education is crying out for some good design, and where does education with no money get that expertise from?
Yeah, I think working in schools is like the best thing ever. This was actually the first time that I had personally done a project that was involved in schools. I think that it's a place that is crying out for better design. A lot of the big consultancies, Smart included, will, you know, we love doing work that impacts people in a positive manner. So, you know, we should chat. I think there is, the one thing I think I have found from doing Big Life Fix is, you know, the number of designers out there that want to be doing this kind of work is phenomenal. Like, it's so huge, and I think there's such a desire to do it. Money or no money, I don't think it actually matters. I think it's about just having like connections. It's just about finding designers that can come in and do, you know, the changes that they can within the budget that they can, because you know, there's kind of like there's a drive and there's a need on both sides. So. Yeah, I'd say sort of reach out to design community and just ask us.
You're on.
Questions? Middle row?
Hi, I'm Ben from Hackney Design. You said you don't always have it in the brief that you need to add accessibility or make a product inclusive. How far do you go, or do you try and if there is nothing in there about it, to try and convince a client to add that to it, whether it be you doing or just changing a method slightly, or trying to get them to increase their budget slightly. And how do you go about doing that, if so?
Yeah, I mean, kind of do it as in a case-by-case basis. I mean, Smart in particular, you know, our kind of heritage is that story, which is really, it's a great place to start, because really if clients are coming to work with us, they kind of know that about us already. But I still wouldn't say that it's inbuilt. So, I mean, it really just comes down to the design, sort of, you know, the designers in each case to kind of always remind themselves, have we actually looked at the extremes here? But I mean, I would hold my hand up as not always managing to do that on every project anyway, because you do get swept along by whatever challenge it is that your client wants. So again, I think it's a kind of, it's why, you know, events like this are so incredibly important, because it gets it all to front of mind and it gets that message out there, so that, you know, everyone here that is, you know, works in this space will, you know, go into work tomorrow and just say, am I doing enough? What can I do to do more? And sort of, you know, sharing stories, you know, big impact stories.
Great, thanks.
Hello, I'm Lynette. I work for a disability charity called Demand. And I wanted to ask about your hypothesis, in the sense that, do you agree completely with it? In the fact that, like, disability is a scale, and are there any points that you would, like, draw the line and say, if we include this kind of subset of people that are maybe very extreme, we actually make the experience worse for everyone? Have you ever encountered that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I feel like Ian's talk and the kind of discussion was sort of touching on sort of similar themes, but I don't know. I think that I'm thinking back to one of the other projects that I did in the first series of Big Life Fix, which was for a gentleman with locked-in syndrome. So locked-in syndrome is, I mean, that's pretty extreme, low capability, like no physical movement at all. He had a little bit of movement in one of his hands, but I mean, he was, you know, he wasn't able to speak, and he certainly wasn't able to really do anything other than use his eyes, actually. And interestingly, when you really, so that challenge was all around him communicating with his family and going through the process of really, really thinking about what really mattered to him. I do think you learn for everyone. So one of the things that we realized was, you know, actually expressing yourself emotionally and expressing yourself rather than being able to express yourself with long, intricate sentences that have, you know, loads of words in them. Actually, a lot of the time, you can do a lot with just sort of almost like an emoji. Like, you can actually say a lot with just one simple symbol. And I think that does apply to everyone. So I think, I mean, design is a process, and it should be ever evolving and ever iterating. So I think there's a place for always allowing yourself to go really extreme.
Can I steal it? Yeah, I kind of just wanted to latch onto that and kind of make a comment as well. It was around, I guess, maybe the challenge around tackling it from an inclusive perspective is that obviously your projects you've worked on, your case studies, there's quite a lot of investment and quite a lot of time to gain the empathy and gain the understanding of that person's particular extreme case, which obviously you need to invest something up front to do that level, whereas I guess if you're designing for the mainstream, there's not so much of a jump. And I'm wondering whether that might be one of the challenges, because like in the long term, that big investment at the start might benefit the whole, but you know, if you're kind of apprehensive about it, you might not want to invest at the start that much.
Guys, these questions are so good. Yeah, no, it's actually something, like, I completely hear what you're saying. And since sort of doing Big Life Fix, kind of like going back into Smart, I was so super enthused by this, you know, designing for the extreme and designing for one as well, that I was trying to kind of push it on clients, and I was like, why can't we put that in the proposal and say we're just going to design for one person? And obviously clients are like, whoa, 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 that's not going to work. I mean, Smart in general have actually always sort of worked with like 6 real people. We always have really small like user groups. Sometimes we kind of match it up with quantitative research, but a lot of the time it is, you know, we're gaining the insight from, you know, like 6, maybe 8 people. So, I mean, one of the things that we have tried, that we did try on one project, was having that small sample, but then also investing a bit of time with one person who kept coming back, you know, yeah, it's a difficult sell, but it also can be sold as kind of like an experimental, interesting thing that really, in the great big scheme of things, is not, because really it is just a designer's time and then you know the person that your participant. But I think where it can be sold, it can be great, but maybe not all the time.
Lots of questions. This is great.
Hi, I'm Harry Voss. I'm a service designer at Government Digital Service. My question was around some of the products that were built on Big Life Fix, and if any of the designs, code, any of the bits behind it were open source.
Yeah, so basically everything on the show is open source. Because, oh my goodness, there've been, I think I counted like 23 projects now across Series 1, Series 2, which isn't even released yet, and this Children in Need Special, because every episode has 3 stories. It's crazy when you think about it, the amount of work that we put in, and then it's about 20 minutes telling the story. Anyway, that's an aside. So it was a kind of an interesting debate amongst the team, because we wanted, our kind of instinct was to open source wherever we can. The thing about open source at the same time is that it doesn't necessarily mean that anyone's going to do anything with it, because you can have a great idea, but that playground was, the expense was insane. And we managed to do it through lots of donations and lots of, you know, goodwill, because it was children in need. But, you know, for another school to come along and say like, oh, hey, I'd like a playground as well, like it's not that simple. And actually, with some of the other projects, there was a well-known, one of the best known ones was Hyan. She and the project she did for Emma, a girl with Parkinson's, where she designed a watch that reduced her tremors. I don't know whether anyone has seen that, but it was extraordinary. And in that particular case, it was such a magical thing. You know, Hyan basically said, look, we need to patent this, and you know, essentially Microsoft, because she's the head of innovation at Microsoft, sort of dove in and paid for it all, and it's now in clinical trials, and it's now being, and so in that case that wasn't open sourced because it needed something like the cloud of Microsoft behind it. It's a very kind of long-winded way of saying it was kind of a case-by-case basis, where we feel like someone can just pick it up and take it. We've done that, but all the projects are kind of looking for interested parties and people that can continue it on, because you know, some of the stuff that we found was worth doing that.
Can I ask a question about one of the projects?
Yeah.
So there's one project, I can't remember the name of the girl, but she'd been in a car accident when she was quite young, and she had really poor short-term memory. Yeah. And there was an application
That's
that was...
also Hyan's story, actually, so Microsoft lady.
An application that was created that basically helped her to storm memories. So when she went on holiday, it kind of, like, one of the things that she struggled with was she forgot things. Mm-hmm. So she forgot her, like, the holidays and the memories that she'd had with her family. This app was created that helped her, and one of the things that came out of it was that it didn't only, like, it sparked real memories, they came back. But you could see this is an app, like, everybody forgets, like, the events that they've been to. Has anybody picked up that and turned into that? Because that's just genius. And again, it was discovered through designing for the extreme rather than just somebody saying, oh, this would be good.
I actually will have to get back to you on exactly where that particular project, that was also in the Children in Need episode. It had a lot of really great feedback. It was an extraordinary thing, and a lot of people will get a lot of use out of it. I can find out for you to say whether what state that's in at the moment.
Because it looked amazing. And
Yeah.
I'd use it. Good. I forget all the time. Any other questions? Okay, can I ask one last question then?
Yeah.
I could ask questions all night. With the playground, what was the reaction from all the other kids?
Right, yeah. So they absolutely loved it. And I think what was really interesting about it was the things that they found to do with it that we hadn't imagined. The way that they were jumping off the tiles to make sounds was not how we thought that they would play with them, and that was kind of the most magical thing. But if I sort of compare how the playground was before the installation, the children were quite kind of they were in little groups, and they were kind of doing these like different activities. The playground like brought all the children together. This footage actually only shows the children that were legally signed off to be on TV. So it's not all the children. That was quite an empty playground. When the playground is full, it was just kind of more evenly dispersed, and the children were kind of working more as a kind of like hive group. So everything I've heard so far is that it's been very well received by them. Yeah.
Amazing. Oh, we have another question?
Oh, just a quick question.
Oh, if you wait for the microphone.
Thanks. Just a quick question. Did you try and experiment with any of the other abled kids in getting them to wear blindfolds and trying to get them to share the experience?
Yeah, there was an experiment done where they played goal ball. So it was actually something that we kind of thought, because goal ball puts everyone on a level playing field by wearing blindfolds. We eventually kind of felt that in order to be realistic, to be a daily thing, to expect the children to always have to opt in to put the blindfolds on felt like it wouldn't happen, basically. But it's really, really interesting because it's by deliberately doing that, you're kind of changing the dynamic in a really interesting way. So I think it's valuable.
Well, it's just that it'd be interesting for the kids to learn what it was like, and
to be blind, yeah.
And to see what the other chap was experiencing.
Yeah.
Oh, if you can wait for the microphone.
Sorry, lady with a baby.
Go on, David.
Sorry. Just to come back to that, there's been a lot of talk about things like empathy labs where you blindfold people and tell them to run across a room and experience what it's like being blind. And the feedback is generally the communities don't want that to be, it inspires fear and sympathy, and that's one thing these people don't want. That's the research that I've been led to believe.
It's another very hot topic amongst the Big Life Fix team. I do like to use empathy tools sometimes, because I think for people that really truly don't understand, it can be like we did a project that was all about hearing loss, and actually having a sort of empathy tool where friends and family of someone who's losing their hearing are able to experience what it's actually like to wear a hearing aid, what it's actually like to lose their hearing. It can be very valuable, but I do totally appreciate that the other thing is to sort of be, to have full sight and then completely lose it. It sometimes can actually sort of kind of give the wrong impression. So I think, like all design tools, they just need to be used as part of a toolkit and not solely relied upon.
Brilliant. No more questions? So can I just do a quick plug? So all of the episodes from the first series are available on YouTube if you wanted to go and watch them. Or there's 6 in the first series?
There's 3 episodes in the first series, and there's going to be 4 in the second. So that's 9 stories in the first and 12 in the second.
Yeah. So do check them out. They are truly amazing. Please put your hands together and say a massive thank you to Ruby.